guys like my hair? My little accessories? I simply feel so adorable. Hey besties! Welcome to my March and April reading wrap-up. I don't even know where to start. It's like a week into May and I'm just now filming this. So I have to throw my brain back all the way to the beginning of March. I do feel like I'm in a little bit of a slump right now, and that is mainly for one reason, which we will get to that later. But I only read a total of 12 books over March and April, and the majority of those books were in March. I guess April was the month of the slump. Let's review our stats, shall we? Like I said, 12 books. I read a total of 4,630 pages, and our top moods were emotional, dark, and tense. So maybe that's the reason for the slump. You know, not even to mention challenging and sad. But those have been the vibes in the studio lately. I did have a good mix of genres. We got literary and contemporary fiction, thrillers, romance, horror, science fiction, etc. So let's just get into it. Throwing it all the way back to the beginning of March, I read I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This is initially framed as a story about a couple. They're in the car, they're going to visit the boyfriend's parents. We are in the point of view of the girlfriend. She's kind of recounting their relationship thus far, and she's thinking of ending things. We don't know what exactly, if she means her relationship, her existence, we don't know. As you keep reading, you start to figure out that things aren't right. Something's not right. Something's off. I actually thought that this was so perfectly unsettling. I thought the suspense was built so well. And I actually had to put this down the night that I was reading because I was starting to scare myself and I did not want to give myself nightmares. Of course, there's a big plot twist. There's this big kind of revelation where you figure out kind of what the whole deal was the entire time. And in my opinion, that aspect of it wasn't as good as the build-up. I still thought this was good. I flew through it. It's just I liked all of those creepy little unsettling bits a little bit more than the ending. I just love feeling unsettled by things. Next, I had another lighthearted, fun read, and that was The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. This is kind of like a true crime horror retelling based off of the real life case of a girl named Sylvia Likens. Her case is actually known as Indiana's most horrific crime, I believe. This is about a young girl who is brutalized, tortured, and held captive by a woman who was supposed to be her caretaker. However, it was not only this woman, but also her two sons and a group of the neighborhood children. Every awful thing that you could ever think of is inflicted upon this girl. In the video where I originally read this book, I didn't have a good time. One, because of the content, and two, I didn't really see the point of this book. Now, I am no media critic. I am nobody when it comes to deciding which type of content or media should be created or what should not be created. I'm just a 24-year-old little girl in her childhood bedroom, okay? But I just didn't really see the point of retelling this story. It's told from the point of view of one of the neighborhood kids who he's like kind of into it but kind of not. He knows it's wrong, but at the same time he kind of gets roped into it and he's kind of sickly attracted to what they're doing to this girl. You know, it's not told from the point of view of the victim, which as someone who has not been through the type of trauma that this girl was put through, I don't think you could right from that point of view. I don't know. I feel like to take a real life case and to kind of fictionalize it and dramatize it, even though the original case is quite literally so traumatic in and of itself. Like, if you want to consume those types of stories, I would read non-fiction books about them instead of kind of like a fictionalized retelling. I don't know. Again, I'm not the police, so do what you want. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and describe all of the graphic details that happen in this book and in the case, but if you're feeling curious, it's on Wikipedia, and consider this your trigger warning for everything. So after reading those two, I definitely needed a complete 180 from the type of content I was consuming. I decided to read The Daydreams by Laura Hankin. This is contemporary fiction about a group of teens who star on an extremely popular early 2000s teen TV show. Like, I'm thinking High School Musical, Hannah Montana, Victorious, like that level of fame. Now it's like 15, 20 years later, they're all adults, they've all moved on, gone their separate ways. They decide to come back to do a live reunion because the one they tried to do originally, way back when, apparently ended very badly. I definitely enjoyed this well enough as I was reading it. It touched on kind of like that dark underbelly of teen and childhood stardom and mental health, rivalries, borderline abuse that goes on in these institutions. So that part I did find really interesting. However, the plots and the actual storyline we were following, I did find a little less interesting. I also read this at the same time that that documentary about Nickelodeon and Dan Schneider came out, so that was quite the experience. Also in the month of April, I read the middle-ish 2 books of the Magnolia Park series. So that would be the first Daisy Hates book and then Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home. And when I read the first Magnolia Parks book, I had truly never felt that conflicted about a book in my entire life. There were so many things that I really didn't like, but I still felt so drawn to it, and there was just something about it that I cannot name that kind of got me. I definitely did not understand Magnolia and BJ as a couple. I didn't understand how anyone was rooting for them to actually be together because, like I've said, I was rooting for revenge. So many of you guys told me to keep reading, and I did, and you were right. You guys were right. I read the first Daisy Hates book. This I feel like is what really sucked me in. I'm definitely more of a Daisy girl than a Magnolia girl. I like these characters a little bit better. I definitely like the vibe and the aesthetic of the Daisy Hates books over the Magnolia books. But of course, once I finished this, I went into The Long Way Home, and I have to say, this one definitely endeared me to Magnolia and BJ a little bit more. I definitely still don't like BJ, but you get a better understanding of their relationship. With this series and kind of like Jessa Hastings as a whole, I definitely resisted it at first. I could feel myself not wanting to like it, but it got me. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's messy, it's toxic. Jessa does have a very poetic writing style. Something about it just sucks you in. It's like reality TV. I also read The Push by Ashley Audrain, and y'all, the amount of times that I have been duped by books like these, books that I feel are marketed as thrillers but turn out to be closer to literary fiction and make me feel very emotional and introspective. It's not that high of a number, but it's happened enough. I went into this ready to be shocked, ready to be spooked, and then I end up like crying in the club. But this is about a woman named Blythe. She gives birth to a daughter, and as her daughter grows up, Blythe really struggles to connect with her. She also senses that something might be a little bit off, something wrong, maybe something even a little bit sinister, and no one else sees it, including the father. So this woman is basically gaslit, and she is struggling with all of these things alone. Again, going into this, I was expecting like a plot-driven, really traditional thriller, but I feel like that aspect of it kind of took the back seat. It was kind of the background, and instead this was so much more focused on Blythe as a character, you know, her inner and outer struggles with motherhood and honestly just with womanhood in general. I really enjoyed this. Like, that was not a critique about the thriller plotline falling to the back. I do love a good traditional, fast-paced, you don't really think too much about it kind of thriller. Those books are great for when you need them. However, I do feel like I tend to like a book so much more when it's a little bit more emotional. It's a little bit more introspective. It makes you think a little bit. Because I am an intellectual person, you guys. Yeah, I just felt this was really good because you did still get those very thrilling moments and those kind of shocking moments while still having kind of a deeper meaning to the story. So 10 out of 10 recommend. Also in the month of March, I finally read Kyra SoDo Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm really late to the party on this one, but if you don't know, this is about a retired tennis star who actually decides to come out of retirement in order to defend her world record of having won the most Grand Slam titles, I think. Let me tell you, I know absolutely nothing about tennis. I am not a tennis star, but this had me like looking up all of the different venues that they play at, like the difference between clay, a grass court, and all of the different techniques and moves that she was talking about in this book. I was definitely in it. I feel like Taylor Jenkins Reid writes very immersive books in general. This was intense, it was emotional. There was also that added element of how women are treated in the sports world and like all of the sexism that goes on with that. And I would say I definitely enjoyed this one too. I still think my favorite from her is Seven Husbands, but I definitely liked this too. That was the last book I read in March, I believe. I haven't been updating my Goodreads like in real time, so I don't remember the exact dates that I actually read these books. But my next read was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and this came out in the very beginning of April, so this was my first April read. But this one definitely cemented Abby Jimenez's position in my future TBR. This is a part of one of her interconnected standalone series. Speaking of which, the only other book I've read from her is Yours Truly, which is the second book in that series. Absolutely loved it. So of course I was so excited to read this when it came out. The premise of this is that our two main characters kind of suffer from the same sort of phenomenon where every person they date goes on to find their soulmate after they break up. So our two main characters find each other, they connect over that, and they decide to kind of fake date, but it's kind of real dating because they want to date each other and see if that'll cancel out each other's curses. I think overall I just love the way that Abby Jimenez writes romance, the way she writes her main characters. Her books have very serious topics in them, and she has her characters deal with very real human issues, and that just makes her books so much more meaningful than like kind of a typical romance, and that's definitely why I like them. But at the same time, she still does such a good job of balancing out that seriousness with the actual romance, with cute moments, with comedy. Her books, in my opinion, are just really well-rounded. I also just love the way she does cameos from the characters in the other books, which because of that, I am going to go back and read the first book in this interconnected standalone series, which is Part of Your World, because the main characters in this one come back in a really important way in this one. So this next one, this is the reason why I only read 3 other books in the month of April. This took all of my energy, all of my brain power, all of my everything. It took everything from me. And that's actually all I'm going to say about this, because I did read this for another video that I haven't posted yet, so stay tuned. But we were wearing our thinking caps with this one. So after finishing Dune, I felt like I needed some shorter books, some quick literary fiction to remind myself that I can, in fact, finish a book within 1 to 2 days. This book I've actually had on my physical TBR for so long. This is Woman Eating by Kyra SoDo. This is about a female vampire. She's also mixed race. I believe she's Japanese and Malaysian, but she lives in London. She's an artist. And this is all about kind of her struggle with humanity, how she does want to fit into society. She wants that normalcy. She yearns for human connection. It's also about how she struggles to find food because she doesn't want to eat people or, you know, drink their blood, and how she's really having this inner battle between her human side and her vampire side. I actually ended up really liking this. I think what did it for me overall was, even though this book is mainly about how our main character feels like she can't relate to anyone around her, she still has these very human issues almost. There's a complicated mother-daughter relationship. Obviously, she has a very complicated relationship with food. And honestly, what 20-year-old doesn't have an existential crisis about their identity and their position in society? Because I know I do all the time. So yeah, this was definitely one of my favorites of the month. And if you like vampires and literary fiction, then recommend. The other literary fiction book that I read was The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh. This is about 3 sisters raised on kind of like a secluded island because they're essentially told that the outside world is toxic and it will make them sick, that all of the men are very dangerous and want to hurt them, which they have all these very specific rituals and exercises and therapies in order to purify them and strengthen them against the toxicity of the outside world. I thought the premise of this was so interesting, and I thought there were so many intriguing elements to it, but something about it kind of just fell a little bit flat for me. The first line of the Goodreads synopsis is The Handmaid's Tale meets the Virgin Suicides in this dystopic feminist revenge fantasy about three sisters on an isolated island raised to fear men. And it just didn't quite give me that. I guess I was just expecting a lot more than what I got, which could be on me. I'll admit it. Also, the writing just kind of felt very lofty. Is that a good word? It felt very lofty, and for the most part I kept feeling like I wanted things to go a little bit deeper. This didn't quite do it for me. However, this did remind me of another book. It reminded me of I Who Have Never Known Men, which I have not read yet, but you guys have recommended it to me and I've seen a lot of good things about it, so I am planning on reading that very soon. Lastly, in the month of April, I read a horror book. This is The Hollow Kind by Andy Davidson. This is a Southern Gothic historical nature, the land is alive and has a vengeance type of horror book. Which, let me just say, any like horror thriller set in the South, it's gonna get me every single time. Like, that is the main reason why I bought this book. For some reason, the setting of the South, it intrigues me. I feel like the Deep South, like the historical Deep South, is just so haunting for many obvious reasons, but yeah, that's why I bought this one. This takes place in Georgia, and it is about a woman and her son who inherit her grandfather's house and all of the land around it, which originally all of this land was used for harvesting turpentine from the trees. And now I had to go look all of this up because I am no lumberjack, but it involves like cutting the trees a certain type of way and like harvesting the sap, and then there's a distillery involved. I don't know why I'm trying to explain this, but that's what her grandpa was up to in this. That's what his house, his land, like it was a whole establishment. And we do get that timeline kind of like from the early 1900s, which is why I say this is a little bit historical. That just adds this element of this land is alive. It's a very old, ancient presence. This was very atmospheric. This was very descriptive. As far as like how scary it was, the ending definitely read like the ending of a horror movie where, you know, just everything is happening all at once. But I also wasn't having like involuntary thoughts of this when I woke up in the middle of the night. Do you ever just wake up at 3 a.m. and your brain automatically thinks of the scariest thing it can possibly think of? Because mine does. Overall, I would say this was good. I do think it had the potential to be really, really good, maybe even great, but it was kind of just good. I need a drink of water. But those were all of the books that I I keep saying kind of, they were all of the books that I've read over the past 2 months, March and April. Like I said, I've kind of been reading at a slower pace, which is okay. It happens. Because I feel like normally 12 books is what I would read in a singular month, but instead that was split up over 2. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you decided to stick around, and I'll see you in the next one.